All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Sam Schechner, the Europe, Middle East, and Africa tech correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. And I've got a great panel here for picking tomorrow's winners. We're going to talk about what grabs the attention of top venture capitalists today, their bets, their thoughts about the European ecosystem, what they thought of Macron's speech this morning. So joining me here, we have Fabian Heilemann. He's a partner for Earlybird Venture Capital. Sofia, Stephanie Hospital, founder and CEO of ONERAGTIME. John Koplin, managing director for EMEAR of CISCO Investments. And Sofia Hmich, founder and general partner of Future Positive Capital. So let's just jump right in. What are your next bets? What are other VCs maybe overlooking? Sofia?
Thank you. So my take on that is there is several aspects. I'll try to be quick, but from a sector standpoint, actually VC are fairly concentrated in the sector that they backed. It's usually music, enterprise software, fashion, food and drink, consumer. And if you kind of put that in front of the kind of the biggest opportunities of our time, you will have mobility, energy services, bringing industrial companies cleaner, and VC tend to just not even look for those companies. And from a demographic standpoint, I think we tend to only focus on the top of the pyramid, so people like us, while you have a huge middle class, whether it's on a developed market or more like at the global scale, that we tend to not even think about. And I think it's a mistake.
So, okay. So, but isn't that where you make your money? Focusing on first world problems, helping me get my dry cleaning faster?
I think to make money, if you want to build a big company, either you have something absolutely cutting edge and better, or you're looking for scale. And scale is either the size of the sector, and the one I mentioned are absolutely huge. They're on trillion type of size. And the demographics I mentioned are also way bigger. So you reach scale faster like that, actually.
Okay, well, so how about you, Fabian? So you're focusing on what Sofia says, I guess, are the wrong parts of the market?
Yes, hi and thanks for having us. So at Earlybird, we are basically having a handful of what we perceive as non-correlated focus areas, which we are all backing with internal practice groups in the investment team that develops quite a deep domain expertise in the sector. And that does not only relate to the startup sector, but also we build a lot of kind of corresponding relationships into the incumbent player landscapes. And some of those areas are, for example, fintech and insurtech, where we have about 15 years of experience, several IPOs from that sector. It is mobility and transportation, where we also have been building close ties with large OEMs like Daimler, Audi, that can be meaningful accelerators to the growth of our portfolio companies. We're also very interested about logistics and supply chain. For example, one of our last investment here in the Paris ecosystem is a company called Everroad, one of the leading European digital road freight forwarders. I'm sitting on the board. And the two remaining areas are, on the one hand, enterprise productivity, typically coming along in software as a service products, and then crypto and blockchain appliances.
What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of hype out there about crypto and blockchain. I mean, isn't that just kind of a buzzword?
I mean, it's true when you look at how much uneducated money from retail investors has been flowing into the crypto market in a broader sense over the last 18 months. This has been a hype, and we've seen the correction. All of us have witnessed it in February and March. And I think this ecosystem is now facing a stage of maturing, and we see a rapidly declining success of ICOs right now, from 80-90% success rates in Q4 2017 down to 20% now in Q2 2018. And we, as a professional institutional investor, we do not, also for regulatory reasons, cannot participate in public ICOs. We rather focus on traditional equity rounds in crypto companies that might then later go for a public or non-public ICO. But we do equity investments and are traditional shareholders in them. Also with regard to the hands-on approach, sitting on the board, being actively involved, needing some governance rights in order to execute upon our approach. And in that respect, we do not invest in any cryptocurrencies, but we invest in companies that typically apply blockchain technology in order to solve problems in the enterprise world that can be better solved in blockchain technology than they could have been in the centralized old world.
Stephanie, you have an interesting platform for picking your investments. How do you tell the difference between what's hype and what's real?
So we tend to be away from the hype. I mean, our model, I mean, as ONERAGTIME, we are VC as a platform, so we're building a platform, and we have a community of investors, and we receive the project on the platform, but also, I mean, being at such events, connecting our investors and making sure that they refer us the project. So we see a lot, and we're pulling a lot of data, and it's funny to see whenever something happens. I mean, over the last 6 months, we receive so many projects on ICO, blockchain, blah, blah, blah. So we tend to be before the curve, and we have a strong investment thesis where we have few criteria that the data we have behind the platform is also helping us to give more facts about, first of all, the entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, what you want when you invest early stage, I mean, you can have all the bets you want, you're betting on people. So the first things we're doing is that you bet on people. And then you bet on the capability of a sector to be disrupted by technology, because at the end of the day, we're only investing in software. We want to have model that can scale. And to scale, you need to rely on the data and the APIs. So when we look at all the investment we've done over the last year, because we have 1 year of investment, 11 investments, they all have the same DNA. Fantastic entrepreneurs, market able to scale, and an attention to technology, building APIs, leveraging the data to have something that is really scalable. And that, at the end of the day, is going to conquer the world, is going to become the leaders of some markets, but with not needing too much cash. So this is also something, I mean, it's not a bet, but I'm betting on the capability for entrepreneurs with the team to be agile and bright enough not to think that the money coming from VC is going to be their revenue, but that they would be agile to find partners and to scale with their customers and to make sure that they build a network effect.
How important is it to have a thesis and for it to be precise when it comes to investing? I don't know, John, do you want to take that?
Well, I think a thesis is just a thesis at the end of the day. So it's a first stab at what you're looking at, but you have to do the work. You have to go deep and understand, is this area actually where you think it's going to go? And you have to adjust that thesis over time. We look at enterprise software across all horizontal ranges, across fairly deep in this stack. So we're looking at things like cloud and big data, data center and storage, IoT, security, autonomous, silicon, enterprise apps. So some crossover with what Fabian was talking about. And you know, we generally adjust our theses around every 3 to 6 months, because what we see is that there are trends in the market that we didn't necessarily always see when we first built that thesis. And as new trends come out, as new technologies come out, we're constantly revisiting that thesis to see whether that was actually accurate or whether we could find a better way to invest.
So these are eureka moments in the shower, or you're, you know, what, reading the newspaper?
It's both of those, as well as a bunch of other things. We spend a lot of time with our businesses within CISCO, looking at what they see, as well as what we see in the market. So we do a lot of, we spend a lot of time interviewing our customers, as well as entrepreneurs in the market to see what's coming. And we talk to a lot of other VCs. I think, you know, it's hard to have really great data that early on in the thesis, like for blockchain. I think it's still early days. We're still looking for those companies that have an enterprise use case that are, let's say, something that you couldn't do without blockchain. We haven't seen something there yet, but we think there might be something. That's the thesis.
But so what's more important, this idea or the connections that you have? Somebody who you trust saying this is something that you ought to look into. Sofia?
Actually, I think it's both. Like I think the quantity, it's a bit of a vanity metric for VC to say I have X amount of deals coming in my mailbox, because at the end of the day, the quality matters, and you tend to not want too many because you can't look at them. So if you have a very curated network of experts based on like function of your thesis for your enterprise, for your crypto, etc., those people are by far the best kind of source of deal flow because they understand better than we do their space. But then I think it's very important, given our role in that equation is to have this kind of 360 view and be able to anticipate where the market will grow. To have this kind of take into consideration those macro secular trends. At Future Positive, we look at this a lot, like from, again, demographical standpoint, from also a talent standpoint. You know, where are the best talent going now? You know, is it the same as like 10 years ago?
So what's the macro trend you're looking at now?
So in terms of talent?
Sure, or
Yeah.
in terms of product?
So we think more in terms of sectors, demographics, talent. So talent, definitely now they want to kind of build something that matters, and kind of there's this new definition of success where before it was just to be very successful financially, and then it become financially successful and very disruptive and innovative. And now it's those two, but then it's to kind of have a progressive society or have a kind of sort of an impact. So you start to see those tech billionaires who built those companies like 10, 20 years ago now starting this new type of companies tackling global challenges. And statistically, it's like 3 times more retention for the talent, and 90% of my generation wants to work for companies like that. So that's a huge thing that we take into consideration.
Fabian, I think you said that you're inbound, you have something like 5,000 deals coming in. I mean, how is that even like a plausible amount of things to look at?
Yeah, so indeed, within our Western European practice that invests from Germany to Ireland, we have portfolio companies from Finland down to Spain, we see about 5,000 deals a year. When you look into the sources and also quantity and quality, about 40% is really inbound cold. That's just kind of derived from the brand awareness or presence that we have in the market, being a team with more than 40 people literally throughout Europe and being in the market for more than 20 years now, managing a little bit more than $1 billion US dollars in aggregate. So this is inbound cold, but from these 40%, rarely ever a deal converts. And then the other buckets, each about 20%, is basically speaking opportunities, conferences, panels, publications. 20% is basically curated from our network. So angel investors that bring their deal flow to our attention, accelerator programs where we are sitting on the mentoring boards and so on. And then the last 20% is really hypothesis-driven, outbound deal flow generation, where our team is conducting deep dives in these practice groups in these mentioned sectors and identifies subsectors or slices of the value chains in those sectors which we consider particularly attractive by market size or by lock-in effects or by transformational power that we think technology can bring to that space, and then actively map the ecosystem and reach out to those companies in a sort of a bet on the winner approach. So these last 2 buckets, so the reach out, the proactive reach out, hypothesis driven, and the network deals, those are actually 90% of those which actually go into the portfolio at the end. And the conversion rate, we can do 4 to 8 new investments per year. We typically write checks in seed and Series A up to 5 million euros initial and follow on up to 12, 14 million. These 5 deals that we make a year represent a conversion rate of 0.1%.
So, but on the other end of the spectrum, Stephanie, at least in terms of cold deal flow, you said that on your site, on your platform, 3 out of 10 investments came from companies you hadn't heard of filling out a form?
Well, this is the case, yeah. We tend to receive a lot of deal flow through the platform. I mean, the idea we had is that we're building a scalable model, and there's no reason why a VC could not be building itself, its technology, to be able to scale and to develop a community approach. So we have this community approach with our community of 500 investors, and the community is growing every day. We take only super qualitative investors, people who are able either coming to spend and to invest in entrepreneurs, not to invest for tax reason. Super important for us, but we tend to have this network effect and platform effect with investors referring us deals, projects, and with online application, as well as the traditional work that VCs are doing. But my bet at the beginning was, I want to build a scalable model for investment. I want to do something that is not in silo, where you go to see the early stage investors, and then you go to see the Series A, the Series B. The way we build it is that we're able to scale our model alongside the company that we are backing.
That's super interesting. John, I had a question for you. You are a VC within a big tech giant. You know, how can you really be agnostic enough to make investments that aren't sort of just serving the interests of your corporate overlords?
It's a great question. We used to do that a lot more than we do now. So we've really shifted the focus of how we invest. We've become much more independent. And so we have, I guess, 3 buckets of investments that we look at. One is what I would call core, and that's really close to our businesses. There we tend to acquire more than invest because it's really sort of fitting a hole that exists. And then we have what we would call adjacent and horizon investments. Adjacent investments are something that we're not really doing today, but we're looking maybe it's on the roadmap in the next 2 to 3 years. It might be something that could be interesting to us. But generally that desire doesn't exist within our corporate overlords, as you put it. They haven't figured out what they want to do there yet, and so we're the ones who are tasked with coming up with that and guiding them in terms of where we think it's interesting to invest. And then finally, in the last area with Horizon, there's literally no one to talk to. We did an investment in AI Motive, which is a self-driving car OS company based in Budapest. It took me a couple months to try to figure out whether there was anybody in CISCO that was even working on self-driving cars. The answer is not really. So, we really had to do that completely independent.
So your company's impenetrable enough that you can't even figure it out.
It's 70,000 people. I don't have everybody's number on speed dial now.
Well, I want to ask you guys a little bit about the European ecosystem and France in a second, but you may have noticed that I have this clunking tablet on my lap. It's so that you can ask questions using the Slido app. At the end, we'll have a few minutes for your questions if you've got any, so send them in. Okay, this morning, I don't know how many of you might have heard some of what Emmanuel Macron said, but among his messages was that he's made a lot of changes, that France is back, choose France, this is the place to invest. Concretely, as people who invest in Europe, has a lot changed? What's really happened in the last year? I don't know. Sofia?
So I think a lot happened, but so we're based between Paris and London, and with the rationale that they're a very complementary ecosystem. But more and more, what we've seen in France is just the level of confidence in businesses and investors and entrepreneurs really exploded. So we used to have to pitch why we're based in France. And now it's like, oh, it's great, you're based in France. I know no one there, so you can be the contact point now. So in my view, on top of the kind of I would say the reforms and around the tech visa and all the stuff and making the system smoother, I think the confidence level is what I would think is the most important.
Fabian, I think you had some thoughts about this too.
Yeah, so as I said, we have been investing in France for quite some time, and I'm very glad Macron made it. I'm personally a huge fan. I think this gave the French ecosystem a huge push and momentum, and also enthusiasm, and I think the change that we have, or the progress, let me call it progress, that we have observed in the French startup ecosystem, especially over the last 5 years, was basically companies and founders' aspirations here transforming from an approach that was our pitch deck is in French, we only speak French, we are building a French product for the French market to build a national, kind of local champion, going away from that and thinking international and thinking global from day one and having an aspiration to build a European or a global leader and being much more international in their approach. And that's what makes us particularly so excited, because the enterprise values at exit stage that we are looking for as an institutional VC are largely or hard to fulfill with this national hero approach. And that's why we are now increasingly trying to build the bridge also between the Paris and Berlin ecosystem. In the light of Brexit, I think this axis is becoming even more relevant. And we have companies in our portfolio like Movinga, who's now making 20 million revenues this year in France and only 50 million in Germany. So there's many successful examples of Franco-Allemand champions, and we want to see more of that. That's why we come here, look out for deal flow, but also increasingly try to partner with French VC firms to co-invest and co-lead their investments, especially when those companies are scaling country by country, city by city.
So is it really just a change in mindset then? Or is there something concretely that's different on the ground?
I think it's a change in mindset. It's basically it's a change in mindset. It is a more open, less nationalistic mindset we see here today, and also again more ambition and thinking beyond the borders of the own national ecosystem, and that's what makes a big difference, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
Go for
Sam,
it.
I wanted to ask that. I think there is also the capital. There is more capital around here, so companies don't need to go to London or the US right away. And the talent with all those big companies going here, you have more and more very qualified talent that French companies can leverage, and vice versa. And that's also quite new.
Is that sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
I think that the most important thing is about trust and talent. We have something that is amazing in Europe is that we have talents. When you look at the number of developers that we're having, it's 4 million. Compared to the US, we have much more developers. We have data scientists. We have big corporations. Look at this. 3 years ago, we would have dreamed to have so many people here. You're here. So this is what the difference is, that France is back, Europe is back, and it will happen also because talents from abroad are able to settle in Berlin, in Paris, come to Paris, but also to think big. And that's the big difference that we have today, is that entrepreneurs think big and they develop in Europe, they go to the US as the Israeli model. And this will happen more and more, and this is a chance for France, but all this can happen if we let the talents come to the country. So this is why this is an opportunity for us, and I hope that this is the message from Emmanuel Macron, is that we're welcoming talents in France and hopefully in all of Europe.
John, does talent, what do you think? Can companies grow super big here, or do they eventually have to leave?
So, yeah, it's a great question. In our space, in enterprise, what we see is it's very similar to the Israeli model for whatever reason. And this is not true in consumer. So with consumer companies, you can see companies get very large and stay in Europe. But for whatever reason with enterprise companies, we tend to see them move to the Valley at some point around Series B or C. There's a couple reasons for that. One is, that's where the acquirers are. That's where a lot of the big customers are. That's where some of the talent is, especially in terms of sales and marketing. But I think and there's also a little bit of a funding gap here at the later stages. I think what we see is there's plenty of early stage Series A and B capital. Once you start needing a check of $25 million, there's not that many funding possibilities here.
Let me just check my back pocket.
Yeah, it's something that not everybody's got hiding away. So yeah, we do see a little bit of that movement. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Some of the great companies in the Valley have been born here, and I think that speaks to the talent that's in Europe. And it's also not bad as an investor here, because what tends to happen, we haven't talked at all about valuation, but European companies provide a similar level of talent to their US counterparts or Chinese counterparts, but often the prices, the valuations are a bit lower. And so by moving them to the US, we sometimes as investors see a rise in valuation as well associated with that.
That's a good segue, I think, to go look at some of the questions from the audience, because it may have gotten pushed down, but somebody did ask why valuations in Europe. What's behind the gap in valuations? Then I've got a more controversial one from the screen.
if I may say, guys, I mean, or ladies, the point of the valuation is always something that is, there's not high or low valuation. There's just at the moment the value that a company can have. And as in our model, we're helping also a lot of companies to get exited because we have a small advisory as part of our model to raise money, but also to help company. And when you sell a company 25 million, this is the average in Europe in the tech. So you can dream of high valuation, but you need to have people who are here, European company, large corporation, that are also here to buy those companies. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the valuation, I mean, is also a factor of how much you're generating in revenue, how much you're generating in profitability. So you can have the highest valuation when your model is there. But think about the exit. And this is always the advice we give to entrepreneurs. It's better to be well surrounded by people that can truly help you, rather than looking for the highest valuation.
All right, well, another question from the board is asking whether you guys are all dinosaurs, even if there's a new generation at the end of the row. Is the concept of the VC dying with ICOs, ITOs, all sorts of crowdsourced investments? Will you have jobs in the future?
Yeah, so we've of course been asking the question to ourselves throughout 2017 and the kind of inflection point of public ICOs and retail money going into ICO-funded companies. What does that mean for the ecosystem? And I think when you look at the last 6 months, you could observe a very interesting trend, and that trend is basically reversing what we've seen in the 12 months before. So the entrepreneurs that thought, wow, ICO is really cheap money, no governance, nobody sitting on my board, no dilution, I basically give out nothing and get money. They realized that the money that they received did not really pay in on their goals, on their success drivers. And they realized the value of having repeat entrepreneurs like myself or others from our and other firms who have started a handful of companies and failed and exited and so on, to have repeat entrepreneurs and seasoned investors sitting on their board and helping them to scale. Entrepreneurs started realizing that. And this is why right now we see many companies from the crypto space first raising smaller rounds, traditional equity rounds from top-notch VCs, and then afterwards trying to top that up with uneducated money through ICOs. And that basically, I think, gives the answer to your question. I think it's going to be a hybrid model for the future. So companies will keep raising ICOs, but the bar for raising successful ICOs will rise. We're not going to see 100, 500 million ICOs pre-money, pre-product, pre-team maybe even, yeah. But this is going to, I think this is going to mimic the criteria for successful ICOs that we also see for successful VC fundraising rounds, yeah, and we we'll see a hybrid between ICO and traditional equity from VCs.
Isn't this sort of the tyranny of experts? I mean, you guys know, you have the experience, you know what you're doing. That's dumb money. I mean, okay, so maybe a lot of ICOs are scams, but it's a real question. In the future, why can't a platform handle a lot of this?
Well, as far as we're building a platform, so we're fully on this, and we believe that the technology will enable us to be much more efficient. Technology, data, and AI prior to ICO, but tomorrow, I mean, and for the ICO, I mean, we believe that something will come out that, but again, always think that when you invest, when you back company, it needs to be for relevant company with something that is tangible. So I think that the value of the platform would be always to be curated.
All right. Well, I guess I have one last question that I'll put. Do you think that one topic that we've been talking about a lot today, and Macron brought up, is the responsibility of big tech companies? Are they snuffing out competition? I'm curious if you guys think people who fund the next round of competitors, do you think there's room for you, or are we in an unprecedented state of dominance?
I guess I'll take that one.
The big American.
Yeah, exactly. I think the reality is that it's exceptionally difficult to innovate inside of a large corporation. That's true not just for Cisco, but a lot of even Google, even Facebook struggle to innovate. And what you see is they often go out and buy companies. A lot of times, the vast majority of those M&A transactions are not to snuff out competition, but to bring innovation inside of the company and grow it. So I don't think that there's, I would like to hope at least that we're not snuffing out competition, that we're working with entrepreneurs on bringing these ideas to life and scaling them. I think that's ultimately what we bring is a platform where you can scale your idea beyond where you've been able to take into up until now.
All right, well, I wish we could keep talking all day, but we're out of time. The top question is how to get a job with you. So I'll leave you to the wolves out here, Fabian. And thanks very much.